For a long period of time, Milwaukee has been known as a production powerhouse. During the 1930s through the 1970s, tens of thousands of families migrated to Milwaukee for a better life. A.L. Smith on the north side of Milwaukee was one of the leading industrial companies employing over 10,000 people at its peak and offering wages that were great enough to support a family. When their doors closed, families were greatly impacted and some were never able to financially recover. Over the next half hour, you will get a chance to see the impact of a large corporation can leave and gain insight on how a community can slowly bounce back. Hello and welcome to A.L. Smith, An American Story. I'm your host, Liddy Collins, and today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Brandon Taylor Hewlett and Nathaniel K. Lynn, the second two members of the Men of Color Initiative here at MATC. Good morning, or should I say good afternoon? Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Tell me a little bit about yourselves.
Well, again, my name is Brandon Taylor Hewlett. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. When I was 17, I moved to California, lived in San Diego for a bit. I also lived in Texas. For the last several years, I've helped my CDL. I've driven 18-wheelers. Prior to that, I did a bit of employment consulting and facilitating. Right now I'm going to MATC, majoring in business management, studying marketing, and at some point after that, I plan to go into public relations. That's the ultimate goal.
Nathaniel.
For sure. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Nathaniel Lynn. I am 20 years old, and I'm majoring here in audio production at MATC. Before that, I was at UWM studying communications, but because I wanted to get some real life experience, real world experience, came to MATC for my technical needs. I have a passion for audio visual and hope to be a company owner in terms of solutions in the future.
How important was it for you to continue on in education, to get more education to move forward?
It was extremely important. I knew I needed to find somewhere where I could definitely grow in. I didn't want to reach any growth ceilings, and I felt like at UWM I might. I wanted to get some real world experience, and I also wanted to just basically become a professional in whatever I choose. The liberal arts education curriculum wasn't necessarily for me, so I found something else.
Higher education is very important. I realized that to grow, you need to acquire more education, and I've always been a passionate learner. So I don't stay impoverished. I decided to get more education, and I'd like to transition out of the trucking industry. It's caused a little bit of anxiety. I'm sure you can imagine. So that's why I'm at MATC.
What do you know about A.L. Smith, the show we're talking about today?
A.L. Smith, well, it originated in Milwaukee. It's been, I think that was about 150 years ago. They've produced some bombing casings. They've been in the automotive industry as well as water purification.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there. We need to go and find some more information out. Thank you both for being here. And now let's get things started by looking or getting understanding of who or what A.L. Smith was, how it started, how it ended, and how it pertains to you and me. You probably heard this story before. Big corporation come into a neighborhood, builds the community up, and then suddenly close their doors, leaving families devastated. Enter A.L. Smith. A.L. Smith started in 1874 by Charles Jeremiah Smith in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as a bike frame company. Years later, under new management, A.L. Smith was able to pivot to bomb castings during the World Wars, then to car parts, and finally to water heaters. During this time, thousands of black families flocked to the north from the south to escape racism from the new machinery being implemented at the time that were taking their jobs away. Fast forward to the 1970s, after A.L. Smith had more than tripled its size in business, and the business is booming. The door is now open to minority workers, and they are able to join unions as well. At this point, the neighborhood is in good shape, the dollars were circulating through the community, and families were able to live comfortable lifestyles. When the doors closed in the early 2000s, not only were some families never able to properly recover financially, but the smaller businesses that serviced A.L. Smith took a hit as well. When a large corporation leaves, it can create a financial burden, and unfortunately, it can lead to an increasing crime rate. So we must ask ourselves, how important is it for us to have big corporations in our backyard? While businesses may come and go, it is ultimately up to the community to come up with a plan to move forward. Here we are. How important is it for the community to move forward? And how can we move forward when something like a big corporation just leaves?
If I'm not mistaken, Milwaukee was once upon a time known as the machine shop capital of the world. So obviously at that time, the economy for Milwaukee flourished. I'm sure A.L. Smith had several thousands of employees, and so those employees were able to produce good incomes for their families and also raise their children. And so when big corporations do that and then leave, it leaves a lot of families devastated, and it causes economic trauma.
Sure. In order to recover from such a dismissal of money, is to go back to your roots and really reprioritize as a community. Figure out what those grassroots priorities are that really build up a community. Usually it starts with farming, usually it starts with technology, and usually it just starts with morale boosting within the community. So to do that, we would have to figure out what do we like as a community, and then from there, invest into that. Right now I see in the community of Milwaukee is audio technology and visual technology is becoming something that's very powerful. So if we could really just incentivize that towards the youth and towards young adults, we could find some new waves.
When we talk about that money, how would it benefit a community to have jobs that pay higher wages?
It would benefit a community greatly, but with the increase especially with the increase in inflation. I was just at a store not long ago buying eggs, I'd say about 3 months ago, and the eggs at the time, I kid you not, the same carton of eggs was, I believe, $5.79, and now they're $11.59 from what I noticed the other day at the store, and that's a dramatic increase. So we need higher wages because, again, as I spoke about earlier, we're going through some economic traumas, and with increasing costs, we need higher wages to manage our families and funds.
And not having higher wages in our community causes what?
Crime, it's a detriment to the community and ultimately poverty.
Can you continue on with that?
Yes, definitely can. So when there's such a void in the community, people have to really get their values together. And if their values aren't centered around anything that's, like a career base, they're gonna find other ways to make those ends meet. And those ends could be overtaking what other people have built and, making it theirs basically to cut the growth period. And also people will just do immoral things. People will lose those moral things that kept them in shape when it comes to family and friends. They will no longer look at those people as family and friends, only opportunities, if there's no opportunities around them.
Okay, we talk about opportunities. We talk about now small businesses. How is it important to have those small businesses in the community?
I think that small businesses does bring a community value. You know, when you have small businesses, then you have a community of that has family values, which are important. So I think that if we can establish more smaller businesses, then we can kind of, actually, I'd like to mention something. Milwaukee, once upon a time, still does struggle with, or I guess you could say, a gang of people called the Kia Boys. And I think I'm not blaming anything directly because of that, but I think that if we had smaller businesses establish more of that family value, then perhaps that wouldn't be a problem today.
And how do you see smaller business having an effect on our community?
Smaller businesses definitely have a large effect on our community because that's how we stimulate the growth within the community. If the people we see up the block are professors, scientists, doctors, or just business owners in general, that will encourage young people to want to do that. If you see that the only way to get money is by working through somebody or by doing something immoral, then that's not the way to be entrepreneurial. And that's just so vital for small businesses to stimulate the community around them.
Okay, well said. I look forward to hearing from you guys again soon. Now let's take time to hear from Amos Robinson, an ex-employee, about his experiences and how he was affected.
1970, and I didn't retire until 2000. They had that 30-year and out program at A.O. Smith. If you get 30 years, you could retire. And I got my 30 years in. You know, A.O. Smith didn't last no longer than about 5 years before the jobs started getting shipped to various other countries. The morale of a lot of us workers at A.O. Smith was very good morale because we had decent jobs, and a lot of inner city people didn't have decent jobs at that time. A.O. Smith gave us a chance to take care of our families, buy our house, automobiles. It was a very good thing. The community, they kind of knew that they had a chance to work at A.O. Smith, so it was kind of nice. They were looking up to A.O. Smith because a lot of those guys figured, seeing us employees going to A.O. Smith, they figured they had a good chance to get hired at A.O. Smith at that time. I liked working at A.O. Smith because I knew it was better than most jobs at that time, paying the amount of money A.O. Smith was paying. You know, it wasn't that many jobs paying like A.O. Smith, unless you had big-time education. I think being close to the job was a very important thing because, you know, if it had been further, a lot of us didn't have cars anyway at that time. And a lot of the Milwaukee neighborhoods was pretty close to A.O. Smith. If you wanted to go out and go to school, they would pay for it. They would send you to school. You could have been, for example, you could have been an electrician, a painter. They would pay for that for you. You know, a lot of us was making decent money at the time, so we didn't go for those jobs. After A.O. Smith closed, it wasn't that hard to find work, but you probably weren't going to get a job paying the amount of money that A.O. Smith was paying at the time. A.O. Smith paid a decent wage, so you weren't going to get that type of job like A.O. Smith was paying at the time. They didn't really warn us that good, but we knew it was coming to an end because they had a lot of us employees training people, like for instance, out of Mexico. They were sending people down to Mexico to train those people. We trained a lot of people, so we knew something was going on. They didn't really warn us that good. The employees got a chance to try and keep their jobs. If you had enough seniority, you could go into a job like welding. A lot of people didn't like welding, but they needed welders, and most of those jobs that we were employed in were ending, and you would have to have enough seniority to get another job.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for showing us what it was like to work at A.O. Smith and what you had to go through afterwards. Now I'm going back to you guys. How important is it for education to find those new jobs, those new skills, so we can get those good paying jobs?
Well, it's definitely crucial to give. Well, like Mr. Robinson was just saying, he mentioned something about how they had the opportunity to go to school, but because they were getting paid a certain wage, many of them didn't take that opportunity. So education is important because nobody wants to be in that same position. For Mr. Robinson and his generation to have gone through that, then obviously you should be trying to acquire as many skill sets as you can, because it's always smart to have a plan B. So I think it starts with, as we both said, Nathaniel and I, it starts with our youth. So we just need to encourage our youth to go and get their educations so they have the ability to get a better paying job.
Nathaniel, you guys going to school whenever. What do you guys see as those new jobs to get that good money?
Well, I first want to just talk about data. Data manipulation is kind of a new nuanced thing we see in the workforce, and that's literally a job people are acquiring. People are studying abroad, doing certain things, and acquiring that knowledge in data and computer science. So that's what I would go ahead and say, data and computer science. And I would also go ahead and say things like audio and visual technology, because we're seeing a world where things just want to be projected onto a screen. Things just want to be in New York, LA, and these large hubs are actually great places to make money too. And if we get more into the age of, as we get more into the age of knowledge and technology, then it'll just be more of a streamline if our community already has those skills.
How does outsourcing negatively affect our community? If we have those skills, how does that affect us?
One, I'd like to point out when Mr. Robertson mentioned that they were training some of the Mexicans, and so they knew something was wrong. I mean, clearly, he just told it. He says that they knew there was an issue, they knew something was up, and then eventually they had no job. So obviously, if you're giving work to different communities, then that community will be affected. And now, and I think that when you're used to making a certain wage where you can afford a certain lifestyle, when it shifts to you making less, then it's going to dramatically affect you and give you trauma, along with especially to the generations that follow.
How do you see the outsourcing affecting?
I think outsourcing can have a negative effect because it can have a ripple effect that will affect the whole community if we are creating faulty contracts and basically temporary contracts, and there may be a language barrier, there may be an anti-communicative element that will have ripple effects throughout the whole community, because then it's kind of incentivizing this thing. Well, we're going to have kind of a haphazard way of business operation, and it's going to have a ripple effect. Can I speak to something that's literally happened offshore? So definitely with Haiti. So in 2010, we know that Bill Clinton was basically sending his crops to Haiti, and this is just a prime example. This came off the back of 4 hurricanes that just hit Haiti. So what basically had to happen was a lot of these workers were forced to work for companies that have overtaken. Bill Clinton put his rice crop from Arkansas into Haiti, and this induced diabetes upon the people inside Haiti. So that's, like I said, it has ripple effects. And not only that, Haiti is the mass producer of rice. So for that to happen is, it's an economic wash. And it can affect, it's affected America because it's almost induced gig economy now that there's not permanent contracts and stuff. Now anybody can get just a, temporary job. But honestly, offshore or just any outsourcing can be bad because it just is illegitimate.
Going back to Mr. Robinson, he worked at L. Smith for some decades. Do you think your generation will have the chance to work at a single job for 20, 30 years?
I'm not saying that the chance isn't there. It's more about the desire. I think many folks amongst our generation, they don't want that because they've seen the effects that it's had on their elders, and I just think they're not interested.
What if it's a fun job? What do you think?
Well, maybe you can work there for 20 or 30 years, but it's just no longer the norm.
Right.
People want to be able to work for 20 or 30 years if they're the CEO. Now, if you're the CEO, then yeah, I'll take my pension and I'll run with it. But other than that, people are just trying to work their way up to a position that they can be in for 30 years. Other than that, it's 2 to 3 years.
And how important is it for you to like your job?
It's very important. You know, there's always an argument amongst, well, I'm speaking personally within my family. There's this argument where you have the older generation. They're like, oh, you know, back in my day, you know, I worked very hard and long for 30 years straight. But then they have broken backs and, you know, broken disc in their spine, you know, from working in factories. And not saying that that's great. I'm glad you can raise your family. But you know, fortunately with the newer generations, we've realized that it's important to us to value that happiness and that bliss within a work environment. And I think that's ultimately what we're learning to conform to, and we're learning how to produce that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what he said. You have to really like what you're doing. We've seen generations of people be mentally depressed because of their job ultimately. And that's what a bad job can do. It can cause you to be depressed. And that can be a streamline for so many more bad things. And you really have to like your job. I think this generation is really figuring out you can find your life purpose within a job. And I think that's something we haven't been shown in previous generations.
How important is it to be close to your job? Proximity.
Well, I'll just say it like this. If you're too close to your job, you might be late. But that's, you know, up to you. It's important to be close to your job, obviously, because you need to be there to make the money. And that money needs to be reinstallated into the community. If I'm driving 45 minutes east or west to make some money, I'm spending gas to get back. I'm spending groceries so that I'm fed to get to that job. But if it's right in my backyard, not only am I around my community members, it's easy for me.
What do you say?
Yeah, so I when I was an employment consultant, I lived 8 minutes from my job, and I actually biked there. So it took 8 minutes, like I said. So for me, it was about convenience. It was convenient to ride my bike instead of driving. I didn't have to spend money on gas. Matter of fact, during a period of time with my role in that job, I didn't have a car because it wasn't needed. And I'm a biking enthusiast, so you know I didn't mind. You know, I could get off of work and go right at home to you know, to have lunch. And like he said, you know, when you're further away, then you need to make time and you need to spend money for more things.
Okay. Thank you both for coming in today. Hopefully after today's discussion, we'll have a better understanding of how we should move forward in the future. And what final remarks would you guys have with us about this whole discussion of a corporation in the neighborhood surrounding, and then leaving?
Ultimately, I just want to say, we, especially black people, we are the leaders. We are the creators. And in the past, we have done so much to create entire industries and business sectors. And I think I know we still have that in us. And a lot of times we see youth kind of disregard that. And we still have it in us. And we can definitely still bring some of the values that we've left behind back. And we can grow them. And I see it coming.
Final remarks. I think mental health is an important topic that we all need to come together to heal from. We have a lot of, again, economic traumas and just traumas in general, whether or not that's like personally within our family or economically or, you know, whether or not that's in the community. So until we can actually deal with our mental health crisis and heal from it, then I think that that's like one of the main points we need to work on to move forward, because you have the older generations fighting with the younger generations. You have the Republicans fighting with the Democrats. And until we can come together as a society, then we're going to always have issues that are not going to be resolved.
And A.L. Smith in that neighborhood is still trying to get his footing, because because the Milwaukee Courier used to be on Fond du Lac, or it's Hopkins. It's on Hopkins. It was right there. It was in that neighborhood. It was one of those small businesses. One of our black newspapers was right there in the neighborhood when it was booming. And so to have a business, I guess, fold, but we saw all the Rust Belt businesses folding. And we haven't been able to, I guess, start our own how do we start our own?
Well, I just want to say a big detriment people leave out is that during the Great Migration, blacks went to the North so that they could earn more money and take advantage of this industrialization so that they could send resources back to their home down south. And it's almost a double detriment that, these industries have been taken out. And I just wanted to add that. But, A.O. Smith was an important part of the community because it stimulated the community. Even if you weren't a factory worker and you were a musician, well, you can pay for your instruments, but without the job, it'd be hard to do something like that.
And it stimulated all the bars and the liquor stores. I know all the bars. I really do. That was my generation, I admit. And I knew the whole area. It was the place to be. The houses were beautiful. It was, how you say, rolling in dough.
Sure.
And then when it started folding, we saw the outcome. When I went to school, people said, oh, they left school to go to work at Smith U. We call it Smith U because they were making that kind of money. They were making that money.
Mm.
So that's it.
Yeah,
Thank you guys for coming.
no problem.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
thank
me.
you.
Thank you for
and
having us.
I'm sure this topic will continue on.
Yes,
Most definitely.
I'd love to be back.